right, folks. Welcome, everybody, once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I am your host, Mike Frank, here with the Jamie Uyeyama, wearing the Steelers hat. He's all excited about the
That's a word
Aaron
for it.
Rodgers signing. We have Greg Famong back there in sunny, beautiful Los Angeles producing the show. So much to talk about today. Obviously, there's a settlement in the NCAA lawsuit. There's recruiting. There's invasion. There's all kinds of stuff to talk about. And we're going to get to that. Before we do, we wanted to mention it's a great time to sign up for irishsportsdaily.com. You can go to the front page of irishsportsdaily.com, click on the premium section and sign up. Lots going on with recruiting. Notre Dame is hoping to get a commitment from Alistair Vallejo, who's supposed to be announcing here tomorrow sometime. And so we're hoping to hear news on that. And, of course, there's official visits coming up this weekend, more the next weekend. There's, lots of guys visiting other schools as well. And so lots to catch up on as far as recruiting goes and discussion about the settlement, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to mention before we get going, our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade and has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, esqclothing.com. By the way, Jamie, did Ge make it through without blowing out an ACL in fantasy?
Yeah,
this year?
he did that, but I heard he's got a bit of a wonky shoulder after. But at least he won't be on crutches. And he made it through the game, so good enough.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear for Ge. He made it through, and once again, ESQ Clothing has been a sponsor for us for a long time, and Ge is truly a great guy that we all really, really like. All right. Let the lawsuits begin, Yama. I mean, that's what we're getting here. This is what's coming. And you got to start somewhere, though. You have to start somewhere with this settlement, and it needed to be settled. There are a lot of things, with the walk-ons and all this type of stuff that we're dragging this down, but now we have a settlement. We know that things are okay. They've gone through starting July 1st. We're to the 20.5 million. And now all the questions begin. And now all the lawsuits are going to begin. And it's interesting. The way this reads it, as far as I've been able to kind of figure out, is the new system that they're going to have in place is called NIL Go, and that's going to be the NIL enforcement agency that's out there now. It's going to be headed by Brian Seeley, who's came from Major League Baseball, and the accounting firm Deloitte is going to be the group that kind of handles all this future NIL. And there's so much to unpack here, Jamie, because the 20.5 million, that's not going to be a big problem for a team like Notre Dame. They just have the revenue to do that, especially because they were just in the college playoff. And if you continue to do that, that 20.5 million is not going to be a problem for teams who are in the playoff. But a team like, say, I'm just trying to think, a team like Purdue, a team like, Maryland, some of these other teams, they just don't quite have that same kind of revenue. And so guess what, folks? Guess who's going to pay for this? Who do you think is going to pay for it in the end, Jamie? We are.
Yeah.
We're going to pay for it. And we're going to see more games on Peacock. I predict we're going to see a just like Major League Baseball, just like the NFL, just like NBA, we're going to see a college football package soon, I have a feeling. And that's going to help pay for all this. And everybody's excited about this whole NIL thing, and then they just don't realize that we're the ones who are going to pay for this. It's not anybody else. It's not going to be the schools. It's not going to be, the players themselves. It's going to be us, the fans, and the students. The students are probably going to get dinged here too, as far as some of their student activity fees and all that type of stuff. And now it's going to be a really interesting situation on how athletic departments are going to fund this, because there's probably only what would you say, maybe 40 teams at most that would have the ability to just fund this based off of the revenue they generate? I would say at best 40, wouldn't you?
Oh, at best. And most of those, I mean, it wouldn't be just based off revenue. They would do it with the help of, other donors and stuff trying to help pay for that. But based off revenue, because now they have to like be more conscious of their budgets, of what they're spending and stuff. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of cutting for, certain things about what they've been spending on.
It's interesting because it's been an arms race. The elites have been in this arms race for a long time about, all right, well, we need this extra recruiting guy, and we need this extra, little thing in the training office, and we need this little extra thing here. It's going to be difficult because now all of a sudden you still have to. Now you got to come up with $20.5 million amongst all the sports. Oh, by the way, almost all of them lose money, but football. So that means football is going to have to come and do this and survive. And it's interesting because I saw a lot of the coaches from all the other sports are coming out and saying it's unfair that so much of this money and attention is going to go to the football programs. It's unfair, and we're the ones who are going to get screwed by all this. And probably they're probably right in the regard that they're not going to get the same kind of NIL consideration that football will. But I'm sorry, that's just the reality of economics. If one, let's just take it from a business perspective, if one person brings in a ton of money, right, you're going to pay that guy a whole lot more than somebody who is costing you money. And a lot of these sports are costing. They cost in order to actually function. And so I feel bad for, certain sports, at the collegiate level, golf or, some of these other things that may, run in the red as far as their books go. But that's just the reality of things. And so I think a lot of teams like, wrestling and volleyball and some of these other sports they're going to struggle to get the kind of NIL money that they want. And probably they're going to have to take some cuts on some things too, in order for this to happen. So there's no guarantee Notre Dame's going to get $20.5 million every year in the playoff. There's no guarantee they're going to be in the playoff every single year. But I'll tell you this, there certainly is an incentive now for Notre Dame to spend because, you need at least the 12.5 or whatever it's going to be moving forward to just being in there for the first time. You're going to need that to fund your athletic department. So there's a huge incentive for Notre Dame to do this. But I don't know. How do you think Notre Dame is positioned now that this is going on? How do you think that this is going to affect Notre Dame compared to, say, a lot of the teams they're competing against, the SEC, the Big Ten? What are your thoughts here?
Well, I think they're in a good position in terms of like they will spend the max of what they can. And I don't see Notre Dame's not going to be the kind of program that ends up cutting costs for things. And I actually could see, because there will be more, there's rich enough donors in some of these other sports, not to obviously pay these athletes directly, but to give money to help make sure that these sports function. There's enough of that for Notre Dame's level for that to continue and them to continue to thrive in some of these other sports that are, non-revenue. But I think the bigger problem is, when it comes down to how much you are going to spend on football and Notre Dame will spend most on football. They'll be competitive with whatever, the top teams are spending, say 70%, 80%, whatever. That's what Notre Dame will spend. I'm sure. But what does that mean for some of these other programs when it's like, basketball, which you think, okay, some of the rest is going to go to basketball. It's like, well, they're not going to spend as much on basketball as Kansas or some of these, other like blue bloods. Or what about women's basketball? Like, what does that mean for like their program and how much is spent there for that part of it? And I don't know how that part. I think it's going to be like touch and go of based on where, they want to allocate funds and how they can find workarounds for it. I think the big problem with this is that it kind of just opens the door for more of like the under the table cheating again. Like it's going to make it worse again, because a lot of these SEC schools, they'll be like, hey, we have more money to give. We want this kid. And they're just going to be, that is going to happen. Not that it already isn't happening at a high rate now, but, and so Deloitte, who's going to be running this, kind of policing all of these, NIL deals and stuff. Like, are they really going to be doing like these deep investigations on how these guys, like, how far is it going to go to that? Cause it just feels like that's going to be rampant. I think I think that is going to be really, really bad. Yeah, well, as Michael Park said, the bagmen never left. They didn't, but then they were able to kind of do it at a free, because you just throw money to the collective, and then they were going to just find a way to pay these guys. Well, now you're not allowed to have these collectives. So they're still going to give this money. They're still going to want this money because they still want their programs to win. So they're not going to say, we're going to stop doing this. We're going to stop paying. No, they still want the Texas Tech billionaire who's given all this money, like that, the woman who is the pitcher who came from Stanford, she got a 7-figure deal. Well, there's no way she's going to get a 7-figure deal from the actual school to pay for that, because that takes out like a huge chunk of the money that would go to football and all this too. Yeah. So how do they work around that kind of thing? I don't, to me, it's like, it seems like a good thing for a lot of people are, making this to be a good thing, like it, but there's going to be a mess. It's going to be very messy. And there's going to be, more lawsuits of being like, well, this deserves that. To me, it just shows why, like you said about football, like football should break away. Football should totally break away, because it is so separate. It's so much bigger business than every other sport. Like, it's not even close. It's not even close. So, and if you do that, and then you have a fixed budget for the rest of the sports where everyone else can get that, fine. And then, you know what? The people who are paying big money for football, pay as much as you want. Do that. Because do you think like people, eventually it's going to start turning into Alabama complaining about like, why can we only pay this much? We want to pay more. We want to do this. Like, and there'll be like Northwestern who can't pay whatever, and it's too much have and have nots already. It's just going to kind of turn into more of like the SEC or Big Ten, these top teams complaining about how we get more. So why shouldn't we be able to pay more? And to me, it just stinks of it's all going to go into like the Super League kind of thing where, X amount of teams are going to break off. And obviously I would expect Notre Dame probably to be one of them.
This whole Deloitte thing, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I read that it formed like, they started doing this June 11th, and it's like, or not June 11th, just like immediately. And they're supposed to be in place by July. Do you know how many people you're going to have to hire to do this? I mean, do you know how? I mean, you're going to look at every single NIL deal. I mean, there's probably 80 guys on each roster who are going to have just the money for sure, and then they're going to be trying to get everything over $600 has to be looked at, and it has to be verified, and then there is no way. the first time, say Jeremiah Love, they get, let's just say, Gillette Razors wants to pay Jeremiah Love X amount of dollars, and they submit it and they say, well, we don't know. His social media brand isn't as large as some of these others, so we don't think that Jeremiah Love should get the same kind of money as somebody else with a huge social media following, because we can't justify the money. Wrong. I mean, there's going to be a huge lawsuit over that. And that's going to happen not just at Notre Dame, but everywhere else. Everybody's going to be filing lawsuits, because the whole reason that we have this lawsuit to begin with was they were saying you can't make money. Well, yes, you can. This is a free country, or hopefully it is for a while. We'll see. But it's a free country for a while here. And we got to hope that they can figure this out, because I just don't see how they're going to be able to police this. I just don't know how they're going to be able to police this and keep it together, because I just can't see. What are you going to do until somebody is this is decided on somebody's NIL? Are you going to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't play," until we figure this out? How are you going to police all of this? And I'm concerned about that moving forward. I think there's going to be just crazy rampant cheating. And Yama, I said this before a long time ago when all this was being talked about as just even an idea. And I said, because I believe this, I think the two very important people are going to be, or some people that are going to be very important, is teams need to be hiring two different types of people right now. One is somebody who can go out and find these NIL deals for your players. That's going to be really, really important, because you're going to have to show, if you're going to get recruiting, based off of the language that they have in this settlement, you're not supposed to be able to say, okay, we'll just use Alistair Vallejo because he's, going to make a decision. Okay, Alistair Vallejo, we'll give you X amount, and we also think we're going to be able to give you, 100,000 or 500,000 in NIL money, and it's going to come from here. They're not allowed to do that, but they're not allowed to say the extra NIL money that'll have to go through this clearinghouse. We can offer you this as well. They're not allowed to say that. Of course, they're going to say that, but they're not allowed to. So if you're going to have to be able to prove in past experience that you're able to continually bring these types of deals to your players. And so it's going to be very, very important for that. And then the other thing is you're going to have to be able to justify it. So they need to find some people in the office there that can help these players build their social media profiles. And I've mentioned this before, that a lot of Notre Dame players are not geared towards social media. That's not something that they're as interested in as some of the other players. Of course, they want more followers, but they're busy in school. They don't have time to be out there, generating all this type of stuff, and they're practicing and generating content in order to grow their social media stuff. So part of the way they're going to justify some of this NIL money is to show that, oh yeah, well, we have this kind of reach, I have this kind of reach, and therefore I should be allowed to make X amount of dollars, where, Yama's social media following isn't quite as large. So he wouldn't have the ability to make as much money as, say, a Jeremiah Love, because your social media following isn't as big. It should be, but it isn't. Do you get what I'm saying?
I mean, I don't know about that, but
no, it should. It should be. I mean, you're the Yama, of course it should.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I think that these are the interesting things. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's one of these things too, where like, if it's all going to be based on social media, I don't think social media is not a healthy thing for most people to be on a lot and to engage with that much, especially for athletes who are playing games that people are betting on. And you hear about all these people getting harassed because it's like, oh, I missed my parlay because you maybe like Jeremiah Love's supposed to rush for 100 yards in the game, but he rushes for 97. And they took him out because Notre Dame was winning in a blowout. But then somebody is yelling at him on its social media about him not getting 100 yards. Like, that's not healthy for anyone. Definitely not healthy for, young, men or women who are on social media and, participating in college sports. So I don't know. All of that is just, everything about this whole thing seems like they could have done this sooner and got it before the contracts got the television contracts and all of that, and all the revenue just got astronomical. This could have been managed in a way that it wasn't, but now it's just like this huge amount of money that they can they have to kind of like dole out, and that people are willing to pay, because it's just been like, they didn't even do this right away. As soon as NIL, like, they never saw that this was going to come, that it was going to get out of control. Like, there was going to be like the Texas Tech billionaire, or that guy, the shady guy at Miami who was paying all this money. Like, they didn't think this was going to happen. Like, it's just such a mistake that it's gone to this point where now it's like, well, you got to start here. And some of these teams won't be, like you said at the beginning, they won't be able to get to there. And then the other teams will want to spend more. And it's just I just think it's going to be a huge mess.
I agree. I guess we're going to see. I mean, we're going to take a whole lot of time on it today, because I think there'll be more and more stuff coming out about the settlement once people can get through the 85 pages of what it is and kind of dissect it and everything. So after after kind of these official visits that are going to be happening here, we'll kind of dive more into it, and I'm sure we'll have a better understanding of it. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here. And I think Notre Dame has been proactive in that they know this is coming. They've been preparing for it. I think they're going to be in a good place. But the biggest thing is you just got to make sure you're in the playoff every year, and hopefully you go far. If you do that, you're going to be okay. But if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. And so a lot of these teams are, some of the teams that are, I mean, even say like an Ole Miss, a team like that, are they going to go to the playoff every year? I don't know. Probably not. And so there's going to be some years where Ole Miss won't have that, 12 million or 14 million or whatever it is they get for the first round. And so they're going to struggle to do that. And I think Notre Dame has to make sure that they're in a position where they're in it every single year. And that's what everybody's going to be fighting for. And as long as you do that, I think you're going to be okay. But I really believe that now you have a set number, and now the next number is going to be that extra NIL stuff. And you got to make sure you're in good position to where you can get these deals, these national brand types of deals. You get these national brands, and that certainly goes a long way, but everybody's going to be competing for them. And as we've seen, Jamie, we brought up the Portnoy situation before, Nike, all these types of situations. They have the money, and they have people there that are interested in college sports and want to help a specific team. I'm not sure Notre Dame has that. And so you got to make sure that you have some other opportunities there at some of these other companies, and we'll see what happens. All right. Moving on here. I know you and Greg talked a lot about invasion in the hit and hustle after the fact. I don't want to go too deep into it, because so many of these guys we don't even know how are going to be interested in it, interested in Notre Dame in the end, and how many will actually be targets. There were certainly a lot of guys there, but I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on invasion and what stood out to you about it.
Yeah, I think it was a really strong group, and it was definitely the strongest they've had in quite a few years. And how it works now, obviously, because of the calendar changing, there's not a lot of 2026 kids there. It's 2027s and a lot of 2028. So guys who were finished their sophomore going into their junior year, a lot of freshmen going into their sophomore year. So a lot of guys who kind of, weren't even really on the radar Like a guy like Jackson Vaughn, who's a 2028 edge. I mean, he's definitely on the radar. He had like over 30 offers, but he's hasn't played a ton of high school football yet, but he came out and was just absolutely dominant and was one of the more impressive performances that you'll see at a camp like that. And I think what really stood out was the defensive line group that they had there, because of he was definitely at the top of the list of a guy. He's probably going to be a 5-star kid. He's going to be really, really good. But the 2027 defensive tackles that they had there, Devin Robertson, Braden Parks, Jeremiah Williams, all those guys look great. They're all 300 plus. I mean, I think when you're looking at that kind of thing, you're getting those kind of guys on campus. They had a really, really strong group of guys on defense in general. Taj Gray and Chaz Gray were two guys who got offers. Taj Gray is a 2028 linebacker, 2027 linebacker, edge / edge is his older brother Chaz. And those guys, like when you look at like that kind of group and what they have with like the front seven, there was obviously some DBs who got offered too, but there's just a bunch of guys that I think are going to be like names that we follow, and where Notre Dame is in a really, really good position for going forward. And I remember we just talked about, Mike, about how the tight ends in the previous last year, like they didn't get those guys on campus. So that's why they're not like where they're at right now, where they're kind of like chasing tight ends rather than having committed. Well, they had like 5 guys who already had offers who were there at tight end. And it was very similar to kind of when they had Komet and Brock right there. And it was like, well, here's the top guys. Now it's going to compare everybody. And they look good. Like they were really, really good. The group as in general was good, but Jackson Dahl and Seneca Driver were the 2 guys who really stood out. I mean, you could see too, like that's Driver. He's skinny and he's like a big receiver right now, but he's going to fill out and he can really run and he's got great ball skills. And there's just a bunch of guys there that those guys, Notre Dame is going to be in it for them going forward and probably going to land, 1 or 2 of the guys, if not, I mean, I would imagine they won't take more than 2, but they'll land a 1 or 2 of this group. And that is like something that when you think about like that one CJ Carr year where they had Cam Williams and Jack Larson and all those guys there, Aeneas Williams, this is very much set up like that, where you could start to see some of the dominoes going their way in the direction they want. And then obviously too, they had quarterbacks there. Malachi Ziegler was the 2027 quarterback. He looked great. Certainly didn't hurt his cause at all. He didn't walk away with an offer. They still haven't technically offered a 2027 kid, but he's someone that I think if you look at him, there was nothing there that said like, you wouldn't think this guy's ceiling is sky high. He's physically like just big time traits. And then 2028 quarterbacks, they had a lot of really quality guys there. They probably had 5-6 quality guys there, but like Trayvon Towns, who's a kid from California, Oaks Christian, he was awesome. He looked like CJ Carr did when he was kind of that underclassman guy who impressed there. And then Neiman Lawrence is another kid from Miami Northwestern who looked great too. And those are guys that I think, like, obviously they have like an interest in Notre Dame. They're coming up to throw for Notre Dame. They got a good look at them. Like, to get ahead of where they're at, where I think last year and maybe even the year before too, where they were kind of behind in some of this kind of stuff. And now they're setting themselves up in a much better situation to take advantage of it. And this is kind of what you win the you don't win the national, but you go to the national championship game. This is what it's all about: attracting these types of kids and getting them there, and then going from there.
All right, let's move on to obviously the weekend coming up here, and really the week coming up, because there are some visits coming. First of all, we know Alistair Vallejo is supposed to make his decision tomorrow. I know a lot of people are wanting to know where that stands. I don't think we know where that's going at this point. I don't think Notre Dame knows. I don't think anybody knows. I think that's probably being discussed right now. and we'll probably have a better understanding of where that's headed soon. It's interesting because I think that a lot of people thought that this was kind of, I don't want to say a done deal, but like, Notre Dame was going to be in the driver's seat here. Why is he coming up for an unofficial before he takes an official? A lot of people got excited about that, but you just never know what somebody's going to think of the place until they actually come up here. And I'm not trying to suggest that he didn't like it or his parents didn't like it. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. It's just Notre Dame's different than a lot of other places. And so you just don't know what's going to happen in this situation. I like the fact that it doesn't sound like Michigan feels like they, are heavily leading this at this point. I don't think Notre Dame feels like they're heavily leading at this point. I'm just glad that Michigan doesn't feel that way. And so that tells me that right now nobody really knows what this is going to be. And sometimes you get into a situation where and I know people don't want to hear this, but when it comes down to crunch time, this is where a lot of the negative recruiting happens, and this is where things start to happen that sometimes are just kind of out of your control. Like, if I were an opposing team, I wouldn't be hitting Notre Dame about the academics and how difficult it can be until right at the very end. Because what you want to do is you want to create doubt. And so you're sitting there and you're saying, oh, yeah. But, are you sure you want to spend that much time on the academics part? It could take away your ability to become a great football player. You're having to walk to class and do all this type of stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I think these types of things are what's planted in people's heads after a while, especially during crunch time. And now we have a new factor that's come into this really kind of this year, Jamie, and that is teams are just paying guys not to visit, right? They're just paying guys. They're just saying, you know what? If you commit to us, we'll give you $100,000 or we'll give you $50,000 and just don't take any more official visits. As long as you promise to do that and commit to us, we'll give you that money. That's what's happening right now. And so a lot of people are like, well, what happened with Cohen Brown? I don't know this personally. I'm not suggesting that this happened, but I do know that this is happening all throughout college football. And look, Texas is not in a great position at wide receiver, just like Notre Dame isn't. And really a lot of teams aren't, because Jamie and I have been talking about this for a long time, and Greg as well. There's just not a lot of great receivers in this class. So everybody's trying to fight for them. And Texas wants to keep their guys home as much as they can. So I'm sure they put a lot of pressure on Cohen Brown. Don't go to Notre Dame. Don't go to Notre Dame. We want you here. You're our guy, blah, blah, blah. We don't want you to go on these official visits. Did they suddenly say, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars not to visit? I don't know. But these are the kind of things that are going to happen. And so we just got to be prepared for it. It's just that's what's going to happen. And I don't know. There's really no way to combat that. There's really no way to combat that. That's just the way it is. And that's what's happening in college football right now. And it's frustrating, I think, for coaches because, you have a visit scheduled. You think you have a shot. And then all of a sudden somebody just closes it down. And so we just got to hope that Notre Dame does a good job of convincing kids to continue to show up. And look, this week alone, starting tomorrow, we have Ian Premer and Talanoa Ely coming on to visit as well. What do you think here, Jamie? I mean, midweek visit, does that concern you?
It's not as good as being around everybody else. I mean, definitely, it's not good from that perspective. But I kind of think when it's someone like Ely who hasn't been to Notre Dame before, I don't think it's a bad thing for him to kind of get like all the attention and just like get the full red carpet experience of that. The other thing is like, it's not like he's not going to be surrounded by every Polynesian on the team. Myron Tagovailoa obviously is a guy who came from Hawaii, just like Ely is going to come from Hawaii to the mainland to play. Like, so that is something that he's going to get a total experience of like, hey, this is what it would be like. These are the guys you're going to play with, on your team, are going to be your teammates. So I don't know if it's going to be that big of a factor of, it's probably more to do with like, he's already got, everybody kind of thinks he's basically USC's to lose, right, already. And that's going to be just something you kind of have to overcome. But I mean, I think with almost every single one of these guys that they've beaten, USC for, the KVAs, the Mad Ferramos and all that too, it's like, well, USC always had this kind of advantage, but they never really closed it and they never really did it. Or when it came down to like what was important to the kid, it fit more with Notre Dame. So I think that we'll just have to kind of see with Ely. He is just a fantastic prospect and would be just a massive, massive win. And I think too, even with Premer, it isn't even going to be about like, what it is with whether it's like a midweek or whatever. His thing is always about like distance from home and what that's going to matter. And I don't know how much that changes if he's like on a weekend with everybody else anyways. Right. So, I think, midweek is always, dicey in a lot of ways. And obviously they don't want to have that. Well, the fact that both of those guys are there too, though, that it's not just one guy is probably a little bit better too. But I don't know how much ultimately with those two guys specifically it's going to matter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you probably put two different kids together, two more different kids, a kid from, very rural Kansas and another one from Hawaii. But, I do think with Ely, they'll certainly surround him with, people that he would be have a lot in common with for sure. And that's what you want to do. Yeah. And I agree with Premer. It's one of those things where, can he go away from home? Can he choose to do that? And that's a tough situation. It's, last week we had Christian on here and he talked about, he heard this long ago that he probably wouldn't be leaving the state. And that's just tough to overcome sometimes. It just is. And so we'll see what happens with that. And then of course, Cohen Brown's not, we don't expect him to visit. I don't know that for a fact, but you do have some very important visits here in Caden Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, Braden Robinson. Those three receivers are very, very important. They're going to have to come up with at least two. They need to get at least two receivers when it's all said and done out of the group that they have left. And then, of course, the offensive tackle, Grayson McKeel, who I know both of us really, really like. I really like Kari Wilder. He's going to come in on an official this weekend. I really like him. And then, of course, you have Kari Adams coming in as well as Joey O'Brien. Huge visit weekend for Notre Dame. I mean, Jamie, this is huge. This is a difference between, I think, finishing in somewhere in the top 5 and finishing outside the top 5. You got to land some of these guys. And hopefully you land most of them. I think if you do, you're going to have a top 5 class, but you got to make sure you land these guys. And we've seen in the past when you look at Mike Mickens, he's always been able to seem to get the guys that he wants and needs. So we got to hope so that he gets at least one of O'Brien and Adams. And sure would be great to get both, but that's probably wishful thinking. But hey, you can always dream. But when I look at the quarterback or the wide receiver position, now that Brown is out, you've got Finley, Fitzgerald, Robinson, Warren, and Brian Williams. You got to get 2 out of those 5. I think they will, but I think they'd like to get 3 out of the 5 if they could. I think Notre Dame's in pretty good shape with Jaden Warren. We don't know that until he takes some more visits. And who knows what's going on with Devin Fitzgerald. Never until he actually comes up and is a big priority and they roll out the red carpet, it's hard to see. But Jamie, I think that these guys are really, really critical. Who do you think are the most critical out of this group right now?
I mean, really, if we're talking in general or just at receiver?
Just the whole group and the June 13th kids.
Oh, yeah. Out of the June 13th kids, to me, it's Kari Adams and Joey O'Brien. It's 100% those guys. I mean, you could say Kade on Finley too, because of, obviously now Cohen Brown's off the board. that's an important guy. And we've, because Caden Finley and what they need, and I think he's by far the best prospect, that's left for them at receiver. I think he's obviously an important guy, so I'd put him right up there. But I think, O'Brien's, decision is coming up the next week after. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that, and I talked about it with Greg on Hidden Hustle too, that I actually think that because of him canceling the Tennessee visit and moving it up, it's a way better thing for him to be on campus with Adams at the same time, because those guys have taken visits together. They went to Penn State together. They were all this. So it's like, it's the kind of thing where if, and we saw that after the Penn State visit, those guys were like, oh, it's like heavily leaning, but it's like, well, they're still taking these visits, and people thought, oh, they're going to go there. Well, it's like, well, you got to kind of hold on to that lead during that time. And now Notre Dame gets a shot to kind of like, knock them off and obviously flip them there. And there's other programs that are after them too. So it's not just the Penn State, but I just think having those guys, you're going to have also your other DB commits on the visit to, you got Jason Smith, you got Aiden Pouncey. Obviously he's not a commit, but like, your guy, Nick Reddish, is going to be there too. That's a guy they got to lock down as well, right? Like, that's something he's an important guy, right? So this is the kind of thing where if you come out of this weekend and you might say, hey, we're pretty much done at DB after. So that's what you want. That's the goal of what you're doing. And I think when we're talking about, like you said, top 5, whatever, top 10, all that kind of stuff is good. But when we're really talking about it, we're talking about like going against Ohio State, going against, Georgia, Alabama, whoever, with their stud receivers, and saying, hey, we got dudes who can match up with you. And we got the secondary that can do it. And obviously Notre Dame, like Mickens, has been phenomenal at identifying guys who weren't ranked as high and have ended up being guys who could cover those guys. But the whole idea of like Notre Dame would have no chance to be in those games against Ohio State. And one of the reasons they used to get run off the field against Ohio State in previous matchups was they didn't have the DBs to do it. But in each of the 3 games, obviously they were 0-3 in those games, but they were in that game. Like, they wouldn't have been in that game if they didn't have the DBs to play with those guys. So they're really, really important guys.
I think that you're right. I think Caden Finley is really, really important. I'll tell you why. He's clearly the most ready to play. He's a very good route runner. His body's physically ready to play. And when you look at Notre Dame's situation from last year, I like Chris Burgess. I think he's going to be or not Chris Burgess, Burress. I like Elijah Burress, and I like Jerome Bettis Jr. and I like Scrap Richardson. Those guys are going to take some time. They just are, and I think Burress will probably be more ready to play than the others, at least initially. But he's still got to grow his body too. He doesn't have the body to take a 16-game season pounding. He just doesn't have that body yet at this point. Neither does Scrap Richardson, and really neither does Jerome Bettis Jr. You need to get those guys physically ready, and I think Caden Finley, it's important because he has that body. He's somebody who can come in kind of like a great house. He has the ability as a good route runner, great hands, kind of an advanced wide receiver. So I think he's important, and I got to hope that Notre Dame can land him. They'll be fine if they don't, but it's not the best situation that you want to be in when you look at it. And so we'll see how it all unfolds and go from there. Jamie, we got to get to these questions as well. We got a lot of questions from ISD customers. The first question is, what happened with Cohen Brown? For weeks, we were told ND was very high on his list. Then he signs with Texas before even visiting Notre Dame. And of course, I think it is. Notre Dame was very high on his list, but so was Texas. And a lot of kids want to go to Texas who are from Texas. that's just kind of the way it was. And really, Texas was not a big. They did not make him a big a big priority until recently. And as soon as they did, that's kind of made it difficult for other teams, and that's just what it is. All right, who are the top 3 2027 quarterbacks you'd like to see Notre Dame offer? Jamie, I mean, this is man. There's so many good ones here. I mean, who do you think? If you were to pick, who would you look at?
Well, I do like Gerard. I like him. I think Gerard would definitely be one of the guys for me. I would go Keegan Croucher. I really like Keegan Croucher. I really liked his film. I think him and Gerard to me are very similar guys. They're athletic. Throw the ball well, navigate the pocket well. Just an easy thrower. He's got like the ball just comes out easy out of his hands. Those two guys for me, and then I would probably go with Ziegler as the third guy. I think Ziegler is probably there's the least known about him based on like what his film is and stuff too, but I also think he might have one of the higher ceilings out of any of the quarterbacks in the entire group. So some of it is like a bet on what he's going to do beyond this. But also too, he is and I don't say it from this weekend too, is he's a very mature kid. He's a very mature kid, and he's a guy who would fit at Notre Dame. And I think you would think because maybe where he's from that maybe he wouldn't be, but he absolutely is a Notre Dame type of kid.
I agree with you on Gerard. I think he's good. And don't get me wrong, I like Croucher too. I think for me, you go after one of those kind of guys, especially Gerard. I would go after that guy because I think his floor is pretty good, and I think he's got a good ceiling as well. But I think his floor is pretty solid. So I would go after him considering what they have in front of him. But if you don't get him, I think you go with a Ziegler, and another guy I like is Israel Adams. I think he's a good player, the kid from Illinois. There's not a ton of film on him. Big, tall, lanky kid, got a very good arm, throws the deep ball well, very strong. I mean, he can throw it a mile. So, this kid, there's not a ton of him running the football. There is some, and there is him, avoiding pressure in the pocket. And I like that kid. I think he's a good player. And so I think you have to prioritize it as if we can't get the guy that we really want, right? If we can't get the guy that we feel like, then I think you got to go with an upside guy. And that's just kind of the way I would look at it, and hope that you hit big time on the upside guy. Because if you don't, you're in the portal anyway, most likely. And so that's kind of the way I would look at it. So, all right. How do you see Notre Dame finishing this class, and will it be considered Freeman's best class so far? Yeah, we get these questions all the time. And look, we don't know. And the reason why is look at Cohen Brown, right? We don't know what's going to happen on a visit to Texas. We don't know. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are kind of key guys when you look at the visits for even next week. First of all, a lot of these guys that are coming on the 13th, they went and visited places elsewhere. They could be, trying to decide whether they're even going to take the Notre Dame visit at this point. Certainly possible. And then you have some very key guys like Evan Jacobson, Ekene Oboko. You've got Dre Quinn. You've got Mikael Blade. You got Elijah Golden, Alistair Vallejo, Tank King. You got all these guys coming, and they may not even make the visit. So we don't even know who's going to make the visits at this point. So I know everybody wants to know, and they want a prediction about this stuff, but it's pointless. It is pointless because these kids are visiting other schools, and we don't know how they're going to react to these visits. We know what they think about Notre Dame, but how are they going to react on these other visits? What are they going to offer them? That makes them say, you know what, boy, this school's giving me way more NIL than I thought they were. Or, by the way, I met the love of my life on this visit at Texas, and now I want to go to Texas. Or, there's just all kinds of things that go into this. And it's not just that. As we've talked about, Jamie, the undercurrent and what goes on, behind the scenes and the bagman and stuff. We don't know what's being offered to parents and to anybody else who's involved. And so there's so many unknowns that it makes it impossible for us to really say what's going to happen. We don't know. We just don't know. And I hate June. Because this is when it all comes to a head and you think you have a pretty good idea what's going to happen, and it just never tends to work out that way. But it's not just Notre Dame. It happens to a lot of schools where, you think you're going to get somebody, you feel like you're leading, and then all of a sudden some other school comes in and just blows them away, and you don't even get a shot at a visit. So anything you want to add, Jamie?
Yeah, I just think it's impossible to do at this point because everybody's there figuring it out. So it's like we can't say what we know. Like Alistair Vallejo's gonna decide tomorrow. No one knows where he's going, right? And he might not know exactly where he's going yet. And it's just one of these things where you got to kind of let these visits play out. And I think we'll have a much better idea, before August of where all these things are, because by that time, most of these kids, the timeline for recruiting now is most of the kids take their officials in spring or summer, and they want to decide before their senior season. They want to do it then. So they tend to do it in July before, the season starts, in August. So by that time, we'll have a very good idea of where the class is. There's obviously going to be still guys like Matt and Fermo wasn't decided yet. There might be some other guys they offer during that time, but we're going to have a really good idea of where they're at now. And right now they have a shot at having, a really, really great class. The best one that Freeman signed. Yes, they have a shot, and we'll see where the next 2 weeks takes us.
I don't know how many times I've talked to like players, when I was heavily involved in the recruiting process and I was talking to the players, and I don't know how many times like say a kid didn't go to Notre Dame and I would call them after the fact and say, hey, what happened here? I thought, did something change? What was the situation? And they'll simply say, yeah, I thought I was going to do this. And then I had this conversation with this coach, and then, it just kind of changed my opinion. And it's like, it's the choose hard part of it, right? That's where I think it's hard for these kids to say, man, I really want to go to school and I want it to be challenging and I want to go out into class and I want to do all these types of things and still do football and do it at a high level. And it's just, people start to get in your brain, man. They just start to eat away. It's just kind of one of those things where after a while they just keep putting that little bit of doubt in your head, And look, I'm sure Notre Dame does the same thing, maybe not as heavily as far as negative recruit, but when they're trying to make you, get you to choose them, they're saying things like, hey, remember this. So there's so many things that are happening at the very end that anything can just flip it just like that. And I've seen it happen countless times. And I mean, we go back to the Peyton Bowen situation. I think there were times in that last day where 4 different schools felt they were getting him. I really believe that. 4 different schools felt they absolutely were going to get him. And it's just the stuff that was going on behind the scenes over and over and over that's what ended up happening, and that's how it all unfolded. So, all right, do we start to worry about Coach Brown? Seems like heavy competition recruitments. He loses. I can't think of one person he has won for us that had big players in it and that he beat him for a kid. Let's wait and see how it closes. Let's just see how it closes. I'll say this. Notre Dame doesn't have what I'd consider an elite quarterback in the last 2 classes. And I know a lot of people, I don't want to, pick on Grubbs, but he's not an elite 11 player. He's just not. And the guy they got before that, if they watch the film, he has a ways to go too. And that doesn't mean that neither one of them are going to be good. They're going to just take time to develop. It's not so obvious. And Notre Dame doesn't produce NFL quarterbacks. How many times are we going to say it? They don't produce NFL receivers. So it's hard.
Hey, Jamie.
Yeah. So I don't know. Was that?
I don't know what happened. It might. Here's Mike. Okay, here we go.
I don't know. Maybe the gods got tired of listening to me ramble. I don't know.
Yeah. So please get Mike Mickens.
Yeah,
Mike Mickens.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Well, I was just going to add to exactly what you were saying, right? Like Mike Mickens made it more of an attractive place for corners because of the way that he's like Sauce Gardner developed. Sauce Gardner was nobody. He was like a guy, like a 2-star, like that he identified,
140
developed
pounds is what he was.
Yes, he was 130 pounds. Like he was not considered a power 4 corner. Ends up being a top 4 pick, right? Like, like you said, Morrison, Moore, all these guys, and obviously he's won. Like Christian Gray was like a big time recruit, and he's won big time recruitments too. But it's his track record of developing guys that as will attract more of these guys. So if they land Corey Adams and Joey O'Brien, a lot of that will be because of what he's done to do that. And really what you're thinking about with Mike Brown is, yes, has he proven to be the most dynamic recruiter at Notre Dame yet? Obviously not. But the reason that he got hired was he developed guys at Cincinnati into NFL players. He developed more guys at Cincinnati than Notre Dame has had at receiver that were ranked quite a bit higher. So that's one of those things where some of it is like, it's got to pay off and whatever. And you got to see guys down the line. I'm not saying there aren't like some concerning things or things that you question about like what's going on with receiver recruiting, but you got to kind of let it play out. First of all, even if they lose on Caden Finley, is that Mike Brown's fault? I don't know if that's Mike Brown's fault that happened that way, but it'll be painted that way because that's what it is. The position coach gets the blame. I get it. But obviously that is going to be one of those things in terms of just perception. That is going to be like a big recruitment for him because all of a sudden people, there's still going to be critics out there, but people will get quieter about it if they land him.
I think all good points. And look, Notre Dame hasn't had a great quarterback throwing recently either. You know what I mean? Sam Hartman's solid player, but not elite by any means. Riley Leonard's certainly not an elite passer. And look, if you would have went into the game in Notre Dame in the Ohio State game, and Notre Dame didn't start hitting some of those big plays to Greathouse, and certainly in the Penn State game before that, you would think that Notre Dame was just a strictly running team and had no ability whatsoever to pass the football because that's the way it looked. That's the way it looked. And you're expecting wide receivers to say, oh, I'm the top wide receiver in the country. I'm going to go to Notre Dame because they have nobody to throw me the ball and they never produce any wide receivers. So yeah, of course I'm interested in that. Well, no, that's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. And so there's a reason that Ohio State gets all the top wide receivers in the country. It's because they put at least one top guy in the first round every single year. And so guys want to be a part of that. And so I just think that they need to develop some guys. Hopefully Greathouse has a monster year. Hopefully Malachi Fields has a monster year. And by the way, I want to say, man, I've heard some really good things about Malachi Fields. And I think Notre Dame is very, very excited about what he's going to bring to the table this year. And so hopefully, he develops and becomes the guy that everybody hopes he can be. But the early returns are very, very positive about him. So very excited about that. And hopefully him and Greathouse just take off and whether it's Minchie or Carr or whoever it is, they have a big year throwing the football to those guys because that's going to certainly help when it comes to recruiting. All right. Okay. Let's see. Given your collective recruiting experience and knowledge of you and your team, do you have any advice for players and parents who are about to embark on a college selection process with the additional complications of having opportunities to play college sports. Advice for parents. I would say, one, as a parent, stay the hell out of it, right? I mean, just stay out of it. You're not the one who has to go to school there, right? You're not the one who has to deal with the assistant coach. You're not the one who has to deal with the head coach. You're not the one who has to go to school there. You're not the one that has to be around the team. If you're a parent, stay out of it. Let the kid make the decision. He's going to be happier. If he's happier and you didn't push him into doing something, chances are he's going to have a lot more success. That's just the reality of it. Happy people tend to be more productive people. And so that would be my first piece of advice. Stay the hell out of it. Let your kid make the decision he or she wants to make. And then two, I would take them to as many places as you can and you possibly can afford. Make an educated decision. And also understand that chances are that the coaches that are there, there's a good chance they're not going to be there for the entire 5 years or 4 years that you're there. There's a very good chance that's not going to happen. And so you got to understand that and make sure that your kid's going to be okay with that. And so that's why so much of this comes down to how comfortable kids are with their teammates and how comfortable they are in their surrounding, because they know that and they want to make sure that they're there with people that they get along with. So, and Yama, you went through the experience. So what do you think?
Well, I think people should find out where their kid, like a realistic version of like how good their kid is, like how their kid is viewed as whatever in a certain sport, because everyone wants their kid to get a college scholarship. Everyone wants to go to the biggest schools. Everyone wants to do that. Well, you have to realize that it's not for everyone. And sometimes you get invited to these camps and you're just invited because you're a paycheck and you're not there. So you need to find out is there real interest from these schools? Because then you can be smart about because not everyone has unlimited money to send them to every camps. So you can be smart about the camps you do go to. You can go to the identification camps at for some of these schools where they have these big ones where it's for there's a whole bunch of wide range of schools that can go to some of these camps that are regional. Like there's the Sound Mind, Sound Body in Michigan that they have every year. Christian, he goes to that big New England showcase every year, all that kind of stuff. Talk to people, talk to other parents that their kids have gone through it. So you can learn from what worked and what didn't, and what they kind of learned from it too. And most of all is I just 100% what you said, Mike. Let the kids lead the way with it. Everyone kind of wants their kid to have a certain thing, and you certainly are there to guide them and help them and make decisions. If it's too much for them, obviously that's when you step in and you help, but don't force yourself on the process. Don't make it about you. Make it about them and where they're going to be happy. And because a lot of times too, find out from your a lot of times you'll find you don't know what your kid actually wants because you never even asked him what him or her what they actually want. Find out what they actually want and what they are interested in, what can make them happy. Because sometimes, you end up going to school in Idaho and you're like, man, I didn't know Idaho was this bad. That's the kind of thing, right? It's based on a true story. It is one of those things where if you're only thinking about just the sport or you're only thinking about this or that, think about all these other factors. If your kid's a 5-star and you can go anywhere, hey, then you got your choice. You can do whatever. Most people aren't 5 stars. Most people aren't 4 stars. Most people aren't 3 stars. Figure out what's best, where they fit best, what they want, and then just kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about knowing what level your kid is. I've seen a lot of kids and parents who push really hard to go to Notre Dame, and you and I and Greg and Matt and Christian, I hate to say it, but we'd sit here and say that kid's never playing here. We just know it. We just know it. And you might get a degree, and that's great. Although now you're probably not even going to get that. You're going to get pushed out the door. With the new rules and everything, you're going to be pushed out the door sooner than later, especially if you can't play at this level. So I think that's part. And then also, as I can't stress enough, I cannot tell you how many fathers and or mothers have talked their kids out of getting a scholarship. I'm just telling you. Telling you. These coaches, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. And if you're a pain in the ass, they're not going to talk to you. They're just not. And there's too many other good players out there that are, don't have that baggage that comes with an overzealous parent. That's for sure. All right. What's your best guess for the final games to be scheduled for 2026? I just really don't know on that. I really don't. I haven't heard anything on that. I don't know. I'll have to take a look and see if I can find something out about that. I know we did already kind of talk about what the settlement meant for Notre Dame. I do think Notre Dame's in a good situation there. It's just a matter of you got to make sure that you continue to get the playoffs. I think the roster and the culture are such that looks pretty good. And as long as they finish well in recruiting this year, I think that we'll see continued playoff bursts and playoff performances, and hopefully they go well into the playoff. And I think as long as they do that, they're going to be in really good shape. But it's going to be very, very important for all schools to do that moving forward. Where you don't want to be, Jamie, is you don't want to be somebody who's always ranked around 10 to 13, right? That you don't want to be in that area. You want to make sure you're always in the top 10 for sure. And certainly somewhere in the top 7. If you feel like you're constantly going to be there, you're going to be in great shape. Anything you want to add, Jamie?
Yeah, no, being in the playoff every year, obviously Notre Dame should be in the playoff every year based on like being in the top 16. But yeah, there obviously is a difference between like the tiers of being like an actual contender and then being on the fringe. And I think right now where Notre Dame's situated, where what they've done with Marcus Freeman and just the staff in general, what they've done to kind of like build up the program, I think they're in a really good position to like be an annual playoff team. And it's about whether or not they can kind of keep building on what they're doing and stay in this tier where they obviously got to that tier last year. But if they can stay in that tier year after year after year, which I think for a lot of people, especially like, Brian Kelly era, and then obviously before that too, there's a lot of people didn't believe that. You got Buckos who was happy with 8 wins every year.
I know,
whatever, right? Yeah,
he's still happy with 8 wins.
Yeah, right. So I know he should be like the Miami Dolphins guys. Every time Notre Dame wins their 8th game, he corks open the champagne or whatever.
Because that's what it's going to be.
Yeah,
yes.
But yeah,
or you could be for a team that was wishing for 8 wins, like I was for years and years and years. So but that's all right. We all know the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl, so that's just the way it is, right? Right, Yama?
Well, Lions. I mean, I think they're in a good spot. I think they're in a good spot, and I mean,
losing their center did not help that situation.
No, wow, that was a late blow. Wow, that sucked.
Big blow. Yeah. Big. He's a good player. All right. Nobody wants to hear about my Lions thoughts. All right. I will. We will be back next week on Power Hour. There's going to be lots going on with recruiting. Hopefully, we'll have some great news on Alistair Vallejo coming up. Hopefully, I don't know. We'll see. And then, of course, there's lots of visits happening, and hopefully they can get a couple. It'd be nice to get a couple over the weekend. That would be good. It seems like kids don't usually commit on their visits anymore like they used to. That used to be fun, but usually they tend to go home and all the coaches get in their ear and offer them more and more money and just crazy things that happen. But and
they want to make sure that the social media edit is what they got to do.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Everyone. So let me just say, even though sometimes it's not the best for us in terms of content, when some guy commits out of nowhere, obviously we want to be ahead of it. But I appreciate when there's these kids that don't care about any of that. Yeah. And they're just like, hey, you know what? Notre Dame's for me. And they just all of a sudden just come out and just decide. And that's that. Maybe they send out a tweet and that's that. And then you never hear a tweet from them again. I really enjoy when they do it low key.
I'll tell you this: it was never going to happen. But if I ever were in a position to hold a press conference, my dad would have punched me in the mouth at the idea of even bringing up a press conference. I'm serious. He would. He's like, "Who the hell do you?" He would have said, "Who the hell do you think you are? You haven't done anything yet." And he would have thrown a fit. Absolutely no press conference. You're an idiot. You're going to look like an idiot. No, you're not doing this. You're not doing this. That's exactly what my dad would have said to me. There would have never been a press conference. So there would have been no hats. There would have been nothing. He would have said, you call the coaches that you're not going to first, and then you call the last one that you're going to. That's the way this is going to go. And I just know that's how my dad is, so, or was. So, all right, folks, that's going to be it. I will talk to you, and Uyeyama will talk to you next week on Power Hour. And, of course, Greg and Jamie will have lots going on with Hit and Hustle this week as well. Lots more recruiting stuff, and looking forward to it. I'll try not to come in the chat and harass you and Greg as much as I do. I just got to go in there and mess with you now.
Hey,
again,
you know what?
I just got.
You're allowed to. It's okay.
All right, guys, that's going to be it. We'll talk to you soon on Power Hour. Thanks for listening and watching.